Well, thank you for being here. I'm looking out at so many happy faces. They're faces, at least, that make me happy to see you. Some of you are current candidates, and a number of you are returning. So we are so pleased to have you this afternoon. It's going to be a wonderful gathering. I'm very happy that you're here. I'm Gleaves Whitney. I'm proud to direct the Hauenstein Center for Presidential Studies at Grand Valley State University. And I'm especially proud to have established the Cook Leadership Academy in 2004. We've had more than 350 alumni at this point come through the programs at the Cook Leadership Academy, and boy, they're doing us proud. And those of you here in the audience are taking your place and doing us proud too. We're so happy about that. I just want to remind us, since this is the first Wheelhouse Talk of the year, I want to go back and remind our audience where this all came from. Why are we here? And it goes back many years to about 2004, as a matter of fact, when Ralph Hauenstein and Peter Cook were talking, and I was there with them. We were talking about some kind of a leadership academy we'd want at some point. And they started squabbling over what it'd be named, because Ralph kept saying, oh, Peter, we'll name it after you. And Peter kept saying, no, Ralph, we'll name it after you. Well, the way they decided to settle things, and this was after 3 glasses of Finlandia vodka, let's roll the dice and see who wins at dice. And they rolled the dice. Ralph won, and he said, you, my friend, will get your name on the Cook Leadership Academy. So it's going to be called the Cook Leadership Academy. That's how it was named. It was that informal, really. Richard Norton Smith is a very distinguished presidential historian. He's known nationally, but he resides not far from here, and he's also somebody with deep Grand Valley connections. And Richard Norton Smith said in about 2005, 2006, that the Hauenstein Center is a jewel in the crown of Michigan. And I always say that the Cook Leadership Academy is what gives that jewel polish. You all give it the polish. So we're just so proud that you're part of that program, and I know that you will go on to do some great things. And right now, one of the reasons I'm so confident that we're going to continue to do great things is that we have an extraordinary leader, the Cook Leadership Academy. When the opportunity came for us, Chad wanted to go to the University of Michigan to study at the Gerald R. Ford School. So I knew after his 6 years here that we would have an opportunity to search and find an excellent person who could step in to the role that Brian Flanagan had started, and then that Chad Dowding had continued. And we have somebody who has come to us. Her hometown is Chelsea, Michigan. She went to Eastern Michigan University, where she got a Bachelor of Science degree in business, and then she went and got her master's at Florida State University, where she got Master of Science in Leadership and Student Life. And then she worked for some years in Detroit in a leadership endeavor, and I was just thrilled that she applied to be part of the pool to consider to come here. And it's a very competitive position. We had a number of excellent candidates, but Grace Tommel rose to the top, and I'm so proud that she's with us. And I'd like for you to give her a warm welcome.
Hi, everyone. I, too, am thrilled to be here. Thank you, Gleaves, for the warm welcome. I do feel welcomed by everyone in this room. So as Gleaves said, my name is Grace Tommel, and I get the opportunity to serve as the Cook Leadership Academy Program Manager here at the Hauenstein Center. I'm coming into this role with a lot of experience in both research and programmatic experience focused on student leadership development. As soon as I heard about the Cook Leadership Academy, my interest was immediately piqued. There are a lot of unique things about this program, but I think one of the facets that really sticks out to me is how much the Grand Rapids and greater community has on this program's, but more specifically, our student success. The Wheelhouse Talk series allows for our students to gain insights and learning from a diverse group of our community's most prominent leaders. To me, it is incredibly important that we are providing a variety of philosophies and ways to approach leadership as our students here in this room develop their own personal understandings and take steps into engaging in leadership through their professional goals. The opportunity that we have to hear raw stories from our community leaders provides a platform for us to think deeper and form a more comprehensive understanding of how leadership shows up in today's world. Tonight, I'm excited to introduce 4 of our very own Cook Leadership Academy alumni. We invite them onto our stage to share with you all their stories and journeys and how leadership has shown up throughout their lives. Each of our panelists has contributed deeply to our Grand Rapids community, the Grand Valley community, and the Cook Leadership Academy community. They all have incredibly remarkable resumes, and if I were to stand here and introduce each of them fully, they would never get the chance to talk themselves. So I refer you all to the program tonight to get a deeper understanding. I first introduce our moderator for the evening, Jeff Domagala. He is a member of the 2014 CLA graduating class. He actively dedicates his life to developing our future leaders and continually makes a positive impact in the students' lives that he works with. He is currently an associate director at the Sanger Leadership Center for the Stephen M. Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. Allie Bush Idema is a two-time graduate of GVSU, graduating as a CLA fellow in 2011. She is here as a mother, community volunteer, and an owner-operator of an LLC, with a passion for community engagement to advocate for issues related to education, workforce development, and tax policy. Megan Sall has also received 2 degrees from GVSU and is a member of our CLA graduating class of 2010. Megan really puts the pressure on me because she also serves on the board of trustees here at GVSU, making her my boss. To continue the trend of the 2-time graduate, I introduce Selma Tucker, who graduated as a CLA fellow in 2011. Selma commits his time to several nonprofits through his work with the public sector consultants. Glees will never forget the winter that Selma encouraged him to continue to wear his cardigan sweater in his own home after doing an energy consultant through his work with the city of Grand Rapids. Selma now serves as the vice president of PSC, specializing in public policy and communication. One of the things I heard as I started this job was that Ralph Hauenstein specifically mentioned that each 4 of our panelists today would make a significant impact on the state of Michigan and beyond. And boy, was he proven right. Here we are today, directly witnessing that impact. Please give them a hand. So with that, I invite all 4 of our Lakers for a Lifetime onto our stage with Jeff as the moderator.
How we doing?
We're doing.
Good. A little nervous after all those intros.
I know, thank you for that.
That's all right.
Well, first of all, I want to say it is an honor and privilege to be here on this stage and also sitting next to all of you. So thank you for being here and dedicating your time and your life to change and making an impact. What I thought we could do during our time together is spend a little bit of time engaging in some questions about leadership and how we've changed and adapted over the course of our time as CLA fellows and looking back at our time. And then we'll spend the rest of the time with some question and answers from all of you. So excited to engage with you. Let's kick it off. I'd love to, we had a great conversation back in the green room a few moments ago, but I'd love to start the conversation about, as a CLA alum, looking back, what did you gain during your time as a fellow? Anyone want to kick us off in the conversation?
Sure, I'll jump in. What did I gain as my time as a fellow? I think the first one is a little bit of perspective around the fact that no matter where you are in your journey, you can be a leader. That you can jump in, you can be effective, and you have talents right now. You have things that exist inside of you that you can contribute to the world. So whether it's in campus or you're working diligently toward something you want to do off campus, maybe when you graduate, there are things that you can do right now to make a difference, and that takes a little bit of gumption to realize that, and CLA sort of empowers you to realize that gumption is inside of you, and that you don't have to wait for a title, that you can get started right now, and I think that's one of the beautiful things of this program in particular.
Nice, thank you.
I'd say one thing that I think about is CLA gave me time to think about who I was as a person, right? So if you think about a lot of our lives is where, we go to school and we're just climbing, getting to the next thing, the next degree, the next rung on the ladder. I mean, maybe some of your parents sat you down and said, who are you as a person? Or maybe they said, get your homework done because we need to get to dinner and then off to soccer practice, right? So this is an extraordinary time to think about, who am I as a person? What's important to me? What am I about? What are my values? You know, what are the things I'm going to stand up for? What are the things that I'm going to let go? And I think it's really important too, because please understand, because we've all done this probably poorly at some time in our life, we cannot be all things to all people.
Absolutely.
It seems like we all want to be, and it's sort of a fun idea, I guess, but it's really exhausting. So don't do that. So this is an amazing time to have supporters and mentors and people around you to help you really figure out, who am I as a person? Because life moves fast. We've all been reminiscing. We all met like a dozen years ago. Some of you might have been first graders then, which is really
Like, no, for
special.
real.
Now I feel really
But there's not a lot of time to do it, right? You have to be very intentional, and you have this opportunity to be really intentional about reflecting on yourself and figuring out, who am I going to be as I move forward in life?
Yeah.
Another piece, adding on, I agree wholeheartedly with all of that. And what I loved was the ability to, you have your classroom learning, right? And you're all in your own disciplines, and you have your group of friends then that might overlap with that. They might be totally different. But I felt like the Hauenstein Center provided this new family. And it helped me. So as you're like going along this journey together, you're meeting people in the community, you're interacting with professionals, so you're learning to network in a proper way. You're learning to have discussions on topics that you may be super interested in and have very passionate feelings about, but you might be talking to someone who disagrees with you, so you're learning how to do that politely but also effectively. But then, I don't know, you're also learning to have fun and just really, again, you're trying to figure out you're learning who you are, how you want to be a leader, how you want to present yourself, and how you fit into this greater community that's bigger than Grand Valley. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And we were talking a little bit backstage about how life is incredibly busy. Yeah. And I think we all agree that the Cook Leadership Academy was one of those things for us as a student that really allowed us to slow down, reflect, make the most of our experience. And I know for me, it was having that intentional time to actually spend on yourself and really figure out who do we want to become, and who's in our network, and who is our supporters, who can hold us accountable, and to be with a talented group of individuals who support you and challenge you.
Yeah, by the time you get out of school, there aren't going to be tons of people who are running around saying, "How can I put programming together for you to make you as successful as you can be?" You know, that's not a thing. And so to have this space, this really special time, I couldn't agree more with what Megan and Allie said. It's like, you have this time, like, use it to reflect, and you have this network and this community that is special, and you're all a group of you're all a group of go-getters, and you want to do really special things in the world, and we're all friends. I mean, really, truly, Megan and Allie and I, we all spent a lot of time together in the same academy that you're in right now, and we're still pretty chummy.
Yeah, earlier this summer, to that point, I was having like an existential life crisis about buying a new car, and Selma took a whole day to go car shopping with me. I mean, it's funny, but this is also a time when you can make really great friends,
Absolutely.
right? I can't even tell you how many people I talk to that say, it's so hard to make friends as adults, right? It is. It is. Sorry, I don't want to be a big Debbie Downer, but it's difficult. And to find like-minded people who think like you and get life like you do and want to sit down and talk about foreign policy on any given night over cheese and wine, because, somebody's nodding right there. You guys are those people, and you need to look around and hang on to each other, because you're all like-minded, you can get places together, but also you can have a lot of fun together.
Yeah, and to that point, to Megan's point, leadership is pretty lonely. Like, you'll get to a point where you realize, you look around the room, and maybe you are the youngest person in the room in that perspective, in that vantage point, at an executive team or what have you, and not a lot of people get it. I have friends who I love dearly, and they are my best friends, and if I ever end up in jail, knock on wood, I won't, but if I end up in jail, I'm going to call them. But they also don't fully understand what this life is like, and what it means, and all the things that you have to balance, and the expectations that are on you. It can be a very, very weighty thing, and like, I am so thankful every day that I have these relationships, and because Megan gets it, right? Allie gets it, Jeff gets it, and that's going to be rare, and it will get rarer as you go along.
And even on that, how many years ago was this? I'm trying to remember. 2013, I wanted to move back to Grand Rapids. And one of my first calls, I'm like, all right, Grand Rapids has grown a lot. I've been out of the community for a handful of years. Where do I go? Megan was my first call because it was like, tell me where I need to start looking or who's who that I need to meet with because you know, she knew what I was about. She knew where my career was. She's who I've always aspired to be when I grow up. I
Me
say
too,
this all
for
the
the
time.
record.
So
Like,
awkward.
for real.
Nice.
So yeah,
We're just gonna put that pedestal up a little higher. You let us know when you're ready to climb down from it.
Yeah, okay. But let's have the conversation about how we're all humans.
Yeah.
Right?
absolutely.
Inevitably, one of you will see us at Meijer this weekend in our sweatpants,
Yep.
picking out yogurt,
Yeah.
right? And you're going to be like,
Were you that
aren't
person on
those
stage?
you look familiar.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you always wear heels with your sweatpants? That's weird, but okay. You know, but we are real people, right? And every one of us, right? You need to remember that at the end of the day. We're all trying to do amazing things. It looks really shiny on the outside some days, but at the same time, we're real humans, and so are you. And so any person you ever encounter in life, right? You may think that you are so far away from where they are in terms of what they've accomplished or who they are, but chances are you're not.
Nope.
Right.
Not even close.
Couldn't
Well,
agree
I
more.
love that this conversation so much has already been about relationships, right? And that is really the cornerstone of when we get to our pinnacles of our career or are still climbing that ladder, we have the people that we can count on and turn to hold us accountable, challenge us, and continue to support one another.
Yeah.
So I'd love to turn and to start thinking about, since graduation might be closer for some of us or farther away from others, and this is a big question, what have you learned in your life or in your career since graduation that you want to share with our audience today?
I love this question. Who wants to kick it off?
It's a big one.
You do, Allie.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
How we start us off?
What have I learned? I think my number one thing that I've learned is that, okay, this is, you can't know where your path is going to go. So it's great to have goals and have, you know, an idea of where you want to go, but don't be thrown off if a curveball comes your way because life happens. I swore that I was never, I always thought I'd get married. My friends swore I would never get married. I always thought I'd maybe have a kid, maybe. My friends were like, she'll never have a kid. I got married, I met a guy, I fell in love, I got married, I had a kid. My career was on a great path. I was loving it. I decided to take a step back for a couple years and stay home, and it was the scariest decision I've ever made in my entire life. And then that's led to new opportunities, right? So like, I thought I was gonna go and be this top lobbyist, and I was gonna kick some butt. And then all of a sudden now I get to be an activist in my community versus in the halls of government right now. And that's great for right now. And I am loving it because I still get to do like what I want to do. So I think the biggest thing is to work hard, have passion for whatever you're doing, and don't be afraid if, you know, your career takes a jump or you get into something and you decide this isn't what I totally want to do, but I love this piece, and then you go out and you find something that has maybe something more exciting. Yeah.
Nice.
It's good.
Sorry.
For
Long
what?
moment.
We don't apologize. We don't apologize here. So one thing I'm thinking about is life takes time. I know that sounds really weird, but life takes time, right? And so I think we live in an interesting age where when I'm scrolling at Instagram or we're reading CNN or whatever you're doing, right, we have CEOs who are not much older than most of you probably, right? And people who are starting organizations or leading social movements and things like that. You can all do that, and in some ways we expect you to, and we're excited about it. But at the same time, life takes time, and it may not happen overnight, and we do have to be patient with ourselves. Life is precious, right? And we never know when we may be here or when we may go, but at the same time, you don't have to do everything tomorrow. Yeah. You don't have to find the cure for cancer tomorrow. You don't have to start a hedge fund tomorrow. You can do it in the next 5 years or 12 years or 30 years, right? And along the way, the thing that we keep harkening back to, obviously, is the relationships and the people that you pick up along the way and the experiences. But we live in such a fast age these days. And I will tell you, I'm the number one person who's impatient with myself, right? I always, if I'm trying to do something or I want to change something, I want it done tomorrow or it's no good. But it takes time, right? And so you have to give yourself grace and just be patient with things. You'll get there, I promise.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, when I first got out of undergrad, I worked all the time. We were just talking about like the number of hours you work in a week, and it repeats and repeats and repeats, and you just work and work and work, and because you want to get somewhere, you want to get there, like Megan just said. And the fact of the matter is that like all that time that you spent, like I guess
In the grind.
in the grind, absolutely in the grind. Someone told me recently. They said. No one on their deathbed said, "I wish I had worked more." Mm-hmm. No, nobody said that. At least not that I'm aware of. And what I would tell someone who was as aggressive as I was, and who really had a clear path, and there was a lot of stuff I wanted to get done, you need to continue to understand who you are and what you want, because that's the really tough. I think that internal question of being able to answer that is so key to rooting yourself in really difficult decisions, because you will have opportunities. It may not be you're choosing between one bad thing and one good thing. That's actually really easy. More likely you're choosing between two really, really great things or three really, really great things, and you can tear yourself apart wondering what is the right answer, and that answer is only inside of you. And the only way that you can figure that out is if you are really in touch with who you are, and you know what your values are, you know what makes you tick, and that takes so much perspective, and that takes so much reflection. So I mean, you're going to have you will gain skills that will make you at Einstein in tennis shoes. Those are really good. Keep doing that, but do not neglect
I haven't heard you say that.
Yeah. Keep developing your internal self and your internal compass about what you want and what makes you happy, because you will be faced with decisions where you're going to say, I think this is what I want, but the fact of the matter is you won't really know unless you know yourself. Absolutely. And you can go off in a direction that is really what everybody else wanted for you, or is really what you thought you wanted, but it's evolved and it's changed. So
And
just
it's
really
okay
spend that
to
time.
have it evolve and change. Like,
Yeah.
it is
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely.
But I couldn't agree more. And it's taking that time to be self-reflective, whether it's, you're in your car driving to work, like, don't have music on, don't voice text or text. And I mean, you shouldn't text and drive anyways.
text.
But
I do that all the time, though, and people think you drive without music on.
yeah.
But we don't. Life is incredibly busy and fast, and we don't often take the time to do that for ourselves.
Yes.
And I think it's so easy to burn ourselves out. I saw a meme recently it said, "You don't let your phone run out of battery. Don't do that to yourself." Right?
Yeah.
And it got you to think for a second
That's
on
interesting.
really of what's important.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we're always going. But when we're faced, like you're saying, Selma, with difficult decisions, what is it about you?
Yeah.
And how do you choose to show up in a way that you're leading and living with integrity, and you actually know your values and know internally what you want? And I think that is hard, and I think it's difficult, but there's a road ahead, and like you said, we have to be patient with ourselves to be able to get there.
Yeah. Is that your answer?
That is. You stole mine a little bit.
Dang,
but
I'm sorry.
Well, and I think, along with acting and living with values, I think about, we've oftentimes, and I'm hearing from each of us, that we have to put your own agenda ahead of others sometimes. And no one knows your agenda better than you. And you have to engage and talk to people and tell them, have people hold you accountable for what your goals are, when they should be reaching back out. Mentors are hard to find, and I think that's the great power of this program, that you have someone dedicated to your life's journey as well. As the world's changing, we're adapting, and you said, continue to adapt.
Change, yeah. One of the things on so you just said mentors are hard to find, and so that's where I love having the contacts from this organization. But one of the things I would always try and do is once a month I'd just set up a coffee meeting with people, and I forget who told me this, that they heard it in some leadership program that they went through, but it was set up a meeting with someone at least once a month, people that you work with, people that you're just friends with, people that you get along great with, those that you may have a working relationship with but struggle, and just ask them, how do you think I'm doing? What do you think? Like, is there a weakness that you've seen, or is there something I can improve upon? Because I think part of that self-reflection is, like, I think that we should all self-reflect, because as Selma said, like, what we have in here and who we are is true to ourselves is most important. But sometimes you need to get a viewpoint to hear from others, whether it's your boss, you get reviews, right? Reviews are so important when you start out. And I worked in a job where I didn't have a review for a year and a half, and then that came, and it was like, we got problems. And I was like, well, where the heck have you been?
Yeah.
Like,
Right? And so it's
I
about-
could have done better.
Yeah, and it's
And
finding
so
those
having
people to
that
check you.
reflective is, yes, you need those checks. And so don't be afraid to ask.
Seeking feedback, though, it's a brave thing to do. You
Yeah.
have to have a lot of courage to say, how am I doing? What could I do better?
No.
What do you notice that could be different if I showed up in this way?
Yeah.
No, feedback is a gift.
Absolutely.
But I think too, with that, I absolutely agree, but you also have to find a way, again, to give yourself grace so that when
Yes.
someone does give
you,
you
Megan.
constructive criticism, that you don't spiral into a shame,
No.
a pit of shame, and just stay there for a while, right? Again, we're always evolving and changing as humans, and we always have the opportunity to be better tomorrow than we are today. And so when we get that feedback in our lives, we can't allow it to crush us,
Right.
But use it as a building block to figuring out, okay, how do I tweak this, or what of that do I need to take in? And I guess on that point too, you don't have to receive everything that people say to you.
No, some
Right?
might be too.
Certainly be cognizant of what others are observing and
Yep.
whatnot. But again, going back to Selma's point, if you know who you are, you know what to do with that information when it comes to you.
Yeah.
Do you hang on to it? Do you hang on to it real close? Do you kind of keep it out here? Do you put it in one ear and then out the other the next day? But giving yourself grace and being thoughtful about managing that feedback as well, I think is really important.
I agree, and I don't want what I said to come across as like only focusing on the failures, right? Like, I think if you do a project well, for example, or for whatever, like something's going great in your life, like you should learn just as much from those successes as you do those failures, because then that can help you be more confident. Because sometimes when you're starting out, like, you're going to have highs and lows. I mean, we still have highs and lows of confidence, but I think that you should celebrate those and learn from both.
But I'm glad you brought that up, Megan, because I think that there's a lot that's right with some feedback, and there's also a lot that's wrong. And there might be this 10% that's wrong with it that you might sit with and think about and reflect.
That's a very good point.
But I think that leads into a conversation about, we were talking about how the world is changing. It's complex, and a lot of people say that we're living in a VUCA world, one that's volatile, ever-changing, one that's uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And so with that, what's your advice, or how do you spend time sense-making of the world, or spending time on yourself with everything speeding by you all the time?
I'm gonna take it from a I'm gonna dovetail on this feedback thing that we were just on. Things are gonna get thrown at you all the time, some good, some bad, and it's up to you to sort of figure out what it is you want to take with you, which is exactly what Megan said. But I'll add on one other piece, which is that if you hear a trend, you keep hearing the same feedback
yes.
over and over again, and you'll hear it in your professional life and you hear it in your personal life. They will probably show up in both places. And you may have been putting that feedback to the side. That might be something you want to pick up and figure that out and unpack it and ask yourself, why am I doing this? And why am I making
That's
people
hard.
feel this way? Yeah.
Well, what's right about this?
Yeah. But there's also, when the world is chaotic and things are being thrown at you all the time, one of the things I want to share is that other people's chaos does not have to be your chaos. Mm-hmm. And that's why and I'm going to keep coming back to this, knowing who you are, really examining yourself and understanding, is this what I want? Not what my parents want, not what my partner wants, not what my community members want. Is this what I want? And that's a really, really hard thing to sort of figure out. But people have narratives. People have stories that they tell themselves and that they will tell you. And we love our stories. And we think we know someone, we say a story, and that's what that person is, or that's what we think of that thing. That is their story, and you have to make up your own story. So people are going to tell you things all the time that are that some things are completely nutty. You watch the news and it will drive you insane. I'm a news junkie, but I had to learn. That was one of the things I got up every single morning and I read the news. It was the first thing I did before I got out of bed. And I realized just how much it was affecting me and how much those stories were affecting me. And I had to figure out a place to put that so that I could learn what I needed to learn, but other people's stories didn't walk around with me. I didn't have that weight. So I would just tell you to make sure that you are really thinking about the narratives that you're hearing and asking yourself, is this a narrative I want to let into my heart, or is this a narrative that I'm just going to intellectualize and is going to go in one ear and out the other? Because you can't let someone else's story become your story. Those impressions add up, and you will carry them, and it's somebody else's weight. So I don't know if that's a great answer to your question.
No.
but-
What about others? We're staring at Selma
I
now.
love that. It's
But-
true though.
Yeah, I mean, it's somebody else's stuff.
No, because I was thinking about that. It's like I remember being really upset around the last time of the election. And I remember somebody looking at me and they're like, why are you so upset? You have so much else going on over here. Just focus on your life and what you can change right now. Doesn't mean that this other bit doesn't matter. So like what you're saying, like intellectualize some of it, but learn like you need to be present in what you're doing and who you're with and, you know, the rest of your life. Like, I think that's important. On the complexity piece, gosh, never mind. I don't know where I want to go with that one. I'm going to let you go.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll come back.
It's like double dutch. You jump in when you're ready.
Sorry.
We need a buzzer.
I was just gonna say, so I have a really great counselor in my life right now because
Amen.
if we aren't telling you enough, mental health is important.
A lot of courage.
And I spent like 2 sessions with her, and she looked at me and she said, I think you're grieving the loss of certainty in your life. And I was like, oh, whoa, okay. Yes, nailed it. That is one of the things that I think I'm grieving. But in truthfulness, I think that's true. I would imagine some of you kind of feel that way too. I'm going to go ahead and stereotype you all as achievers. I mean, you're in a leadership program, let's be honest. At some point, right, we can achieve because we know what the boundaries, we know what the parameters are. You will get to a point in your life at some stage where all the boundaries and parameters will disappear. And then you won't know what to do with yourself because you won't quite know how to achieve your way out of that. I often ask myself the question, am I doing life right? And you all from the outside will probably think, oh gosh, Megan, like that's a dumb question for you to ask, right? You're on the board of trustees, you know, you have a great job, all these things, yada, yada, and that's fine. But at some point when those parameters disappear, you gotta really dig deep inside and say, what things did I want for myself? What things do I want for myself? Going back to Selma's comments, if we don't know who we are and what's important to us and what makes us feel successful, the world is not gonna be there for you when you need it to tell you that you're doing a good job. So you really have to think through that for yourself to figure out what does it mean for me to be doing good at life.
I love that you said all of these accolades that make you who you are. I recently had a leadership coach who said, Jeff, why does everything for you need to be so perfect? And what are you missing out on as a result? And it really leads you to think about what's deep inside that you're missing out on. And from that question, I oftentimes think about, what if I just sit here and let life happen?
Yeah.
Or be more reflective, or be a little bit more adaptive, or respond to things as necessary? Why do you always have to be the one in charge?
Yeah.
And so I think just digging a little deeper is hard to do, but the common theme I think you're hearing is it's so important, and we don't often take the time to do it.
Yeah.
And it often leads to a greater result, because who are you left with at the end of the day when you're laying in bed is your own thoughts. Your mind wanders,
Yeah.
right? And spending time in reflection. What's great about Grand Rapids is you've got a great city, but you're also surrounded a lot by nature. And nature has been a saving grace, at least for me. I'm big into nature photography, amateur nature photography, but one of the things just getting out there and spending time with your own thoughts, like you said, driving with no music. What does it look like to go on a walk by yourself? For the longest time, I I struggle to go out to dinner by yourself or go have coffee by yourself or just spend time with Jeff, right? What does that look like? And so I think in a world that's changing and complex and uncertain, I think it's important that we really do know who we are and ourselves and what it is that we want, because that's where there's power.
Yeah.
I also think,
Go.
I also think kind of on that reflection, and you mentioned nature, it reminded me of this study I read about how important vacation time is. I know when you're starting out, you're in the grind. You also probably might not have all the vacation time that you want. So it's how do you, if you do have the vacation time, what the article said was how important it is for a 2-week vacation every year for people for mental health. And because that first week you're not shutting off, and then that second week you can truly, and then that second week you can be by yourself. And I also have done it multiple times where I point blank would tell my bosses, I'm going on vacation, I will not be checking my email. You are on your own. And it was the most liberating and thing I ever did. And it's hard to do, right? Because we live in a cell phone world. But when I go on vacation, I usually check my phone once a day, but I never check emails. And it's because of that, because you need to shut off. You need to have that reflection, do what makes you happy in that time. And I think, so again, you can't always do the 2 weeks. So on the weekends, try and make that time for yourself. Be involved, but
Yeah. Something you said struck me, Allie. I'm going out. I'm not checking my email.
Yeah.
And what Allie's not telling, the part that Allie's probably not telling you, and you tell me if I'm characterizing this wrong or if I got this right or not, is that Allie is showing up to work every day and she is serving her colleagues, and her colleagues are serving her. And so she's asking for this because she wants to make sure that when she leaves, her people are going to make sure that she's taken care of.
Right.
And when they leave, they are going to want the same courtesy.
Right.
And
Yes.
you are working. She's not alone. She's not working in an environment where it is just her. She has a boss. She has a team. She has a community of people that she has to serve. And why do you have to? Jeff asked the question earlier. Why do you have to always be right? Why do you always have to have the answer? Why do you always have to have these things? And we put ourselves in these really impossible scenarios where we perform and we do super well, and then all of a sudden it's like I've reached the end and I'm like, I'm so terrified because I don't actually know the answer to this question and I don't know how to climb down from this pedestal. And it is an incredibly difficult thing to do. So if you can be honest about what it is you need and the boundaries that you have, and realize that you're not perfect and no one around you is perfect, and you're all doing it together so that when you leave on that vacation, they got your back. And that's what you need. That is when your power expands and multiplies, when other people also have your back because you've served them really well. So that's why she comes back and things are fine.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then she can take that time off.
right.
Well, we talked a lot about reflection and self, and we are amongst the Cook Leadership Academy, and I think the power in that is that it's an interdisciplinary program, right, where we got people from all over the university coming together to engage in conversations about leadership. And so I think in this day and age, when you Google leadership, you have 95 million different definitions of what leadership is. And so I'm curious from perspective up here, leadership defined, or what skills are really important from your perspective of what it means or what it takes to be a leader?
I feel like there's like a whole vocabulary of words that
Right.
are just going to come out of our mouth.
I think one thing about leadership is being willing to make decisions or give an opinion and then stand behind it and stick with it. Being willing to make a comment and brace yourself for whatever might come back, whether it's good or bad, or, I mean, for us to even sit here, some of you might afterwards be like, that was the dumbest talk I've ever heard, I didn't learn anything from that. And that's okay, and that's your opinion, and you may have that. I may not receive that if you tell it to me, but you may have that, right? And some people might think differently, but I guess for us to be willing to sit here and share things and be vulnerable and say, hey, I know I'm not the expert in anything, but I've lived some life, and this is what it's looked like, or this is what it's felt like, and be willing to take whatever repercussions come with that. I think that's an example.
Yeah, Megan said the the word vulnerable, and it's super, super important because I mean, I can tell you my own story, which is that I was so aggressive, and I wanted to achieve, and I did, and I got there, and I realized it's like there's so many things. Like I'm like, oh, once I got here, I'm fine, it's great. And the fact of the matter is that there was all this other stuff that I neglected along the way, and I'm like having to go back and pick those things up. And I've had to tell people that I'm not perfect. And that was actually harder than the 60 plus hours a week every single week. And I thought that I was like, wow, I'm not Superman, and I feel like a fraud and a complete failure because there are things that I've screwed up, and I can't believe I've made such a mess of some of these things. And in those moments, and I've had some help, I had some really good feedback, but in those moments, what I learned is that even though I'm really good, and I have some talents that are really, really special, what's more special is being able to, like I said earlier, multiply that goodness and get people to follow you, get people to say, I'm investing in you and I believe in you. You don't have to have all the answers, Selma. And I don't believe you have all the answers. You're sitting here telling me you don't have all the answers, but I trust that you have good judgment. I trust that you're going to do your best to figure it out. I trust that you have integrity and you're going to be honest. And those things, integrity and honest, how do people know that about you? How do they know that you're an integrous person? It's when you can say, you know what, I screwed up. Yeah. This was not becoming of the person that I wanted to be. And you can have that failure, and that failure can be the most empowering thing that happens to you. So that vulnerability is incredibly important, and you will get it's attractive. People are attracted to it because they're like, oh my God, I really thought you were Superman. And turns out it's like, I'm just like everybody else. Like we're all the same. And I just think it's just really, really critical.
I think I agree. I was thinking as you were both speaking about this, about my favorite boss, and because he's like the epitome of a leader in my eyes, right? So he had passion. I think it's important to have passion about what you're doing if you're going to be a leader, right? So that way people will want to follow and buy in. I think having compassion, being vulnerable, that helps remind us all that we're human. And then, again, human, you're free to take chances. I think that's also being able to be confident yet humble, being able to work with people. So I'm trying to think how to say this eloquently. I'm not as eloquent of a speaker as these two. I always feel like, especially when you start out, you're in this grind, right? Like it's all a competition. I have a counterpart. We're at the same level. I got to be the best so I get the promotion. But I also think it's important to help build each other up, because if you're just going to bulldoze over everyone else, people are going to start to realize that you're superficial. You're working on a superficial level, right? Because you're not invested in those around you, and you can have a stronger organization if you're building each other up and working together. My boss had a counterpart, so I worked at a nonprofit. There were multiple ones of similar. I worked at a Grand Rapids chamber. There were multiple chambers across Michigan and the U.S. And I remember my boss's counterpart from far away said, "I can't believe you let your directors give presentations to the board. Like, why? That's your job security. Why would you do that?" And he's like, "But I want them to be trained so that way they can go on to the next. I want them to own what they're working on." And so I think being able to take ownership of what you're working on and be able to be courageous and go into that, I think that was a beautiful testament to his leadership style. Yeah. So, sorry.
Great. I love the idea of courage across all of these conversations. I also think in today's time, it's really important to lead across difference, and you're not going to agree with everyone, and you're going to engage in some difficult conversations. But what I think is really difficult often sometimes is we don't take the time to listen. We don't take the time to pause and hear people out fully. We are so quick to react instead of really show up and respond. And so with that is leading with empathy, but also courage. What does it take to actively listen and hear one another and to show up to be able to be vulnerable and share our stories, but also listen to what one another are saying and what are they not saying? What's deep down and what's below there? I also think we talked a lot about values and knowing yourself, and if you can lead with that and you can really make decisions and that your decisions are congruent with the things that you believe in, and they're not just things that you espouse and put on a piece of paper,
Right.
but that you're purposeful in your approach, whether it's standing behind a big decision or it's taking the time to self-reflect. So we've taken a lot of time today to engage and to be reflective, but what I want to do at this point, and we had a lot more questions prepared, but we had some great conversation. I'd love to open up the floor to all of you, and we're going to move into some question and answers. And so if you're interested in engaging with one of us, feel free to come up to a microphone and
We'll bring it out to y'all if you raise your hand.
what's pressing?
Hi, my name is Casey. Sorry. I'm a senior at Grand Valley studying finance. And my question is, in my internship this summer, there was a lot of times that my personality or my leadership style didn't go well with other people. And my manager had said that's something you learn over time, how you fit in with the crowd while still being yourself. So can you guys speak kind of on figuring out how your leadership style works with people that don't follow the same theory about it or the practice?
Yeah, so that you're saying really about how do you stand up, be yourself, but also adapt to the needs of others, right?
Yep.
Okay. That's a great question.
So I'm going to use sort of I think it's really important to figure out what it takes to be effective, right? And so depending on what your goals are for yourself or the organization you're a part of, what does it take to be effective? This is going to sound really basic, but I am a person of not great stature in terms of my height. I wear heels a lot, right? People probably think it's sort of a silly thing. Maybe it's just a style preference, whatever. But I know that I don't have the same physical presence that other people do in my role or whatnot. And so sometimes I dress a certain way or I put heels on so that I know that I can be effective with what I want to do for that day. And so I think when it comes to any job that you're in, right, you kind of have to know your audience, right? So take the time to get to know people, find out sort of who they are and what they're about. And I would imagine we have this in all of our organizations. You kind of know how you need to couch something in order to get your point across to this individual. And if you're going to say it to someone else, you kind of have to do this or that, or whether it's a board of directors or a city council or whatnot. Right. But you have to invest the time into knowing who the people are around you and kind of figuring out how do you deliver the message and what ways can they be most receptive. Again, always be true to yourself and what you need to be doing, but you kind of have to put a little effort into figuring out how can I be effective in this role? What's gonna get my point across? How can I, it's impossible to work with people, quite honestly, if you're enemies or if you don't like each other. I won't say it's impossible, but it's really difficult. It'll take 3 times as long to get anything done. So again, figure out, can I still be me and converse with this person in such a way that they can, we can still find mutual agreement in moving our goals forward or not. And so I feel like I'm just babbling now, but
No, that's spot on because it's communication style and conflict resolution. Like I think that those are, I know that, when you're going through this program, I think you guys do there's a million different things, Gallup, DISC, like all these different assessments, right? And I think conflict resolution is the biggest thing to understand and learn about, because then you can go into every meeting or any organization or social setting, and you can understand, you start to pick up on it, like how people tick, and you can still be authentic and true to yourself, but you need to function with others in society. And so the more you practice that and consciously think about these things, the better. I love that you wear heels as a short stature, because when I worked in a male-dominant oriented place, I always wore heels on the days I needed to have my voice heard. It's so interesting.
and it's a thing.
It's totally.
I love that. I think, but also think of it, so it's a
I called it
stretch
my soapbox.
opportunity for you, right? And so think about that. Most of what challenges us is outside of our comfort zone. But that's where the most learning happens. And so think, in order for you to be able to show up and fully engage, you have to do what Megan's saying, is to really take some time to be reflective before you jump into the situation. So that means be thoughtful about your approach before you're in this situation, right?
And they mentioned, there's two things I'll dovetail on one, which is like DISC, there's a whole bunch of them, right? And that's the framework that will help you figure out what your style is. Everyone has a unique leadership style. I'm a DI. It was really helpful when I learned that. They're characterized by being aggressive. They're very results oriented, and they tend not to. The I is pretty people focused, but they tend to be really focused on the work and getting an outcome done. That's what gets me energized. The people that work for me, may care a lot more about having stronger interpersonal relationships with each other. And that might annoy me because I don't think it's that important, right? Like just how, I may not think it's that important that we have a potluck at work but other people may think it's like, I have to know these people, or compliance is very, very important to them. And I'm like, well, what good is compliance if we're not meeting the goal? And the fact of the matter is that everyone has something to offer, and having a framework for which you can understand what those people are offering and the gifts that they have, because everyone has them, and it's figuring out how can you leverage what they're really, really good at. And using one of those frameworks, I think, is super helpful. So DISC and Gala, Allie certainly mentioned those. But the other thing I'll tell you is, and whether you know it or not, managing and setting expectations. So telling people, this is what I can commit to. This is what you can expect from me. And you can do that regardless. And then actually do what you said you were going to do. Yeah. That is so critical, because that is how you build credibility. That is how you build respect between each other. And you may be different, but they know that they can depend on you. Yeah. And so if you can manage those expectations and set them appropriately, which you can do no matter where you are on the DISC profile, that's a really, really big deal. And that is taking ownership of your contribution to whatever it is you and that other person are trying to get done.
Yeah. And it takes time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions?
So you guys talked a lot about self-reflection and stuff like that. And for me, when I try to do those things, sit down, have a cup of coffee with myself, turn off my phone, my biggest enemy is my mind. And I just can't turn it off. Mm-hmm. I start to think of all the stuff that I have to do, all the things that I could be doing, what I should be doing, things like that. Sure. So how do you guys kind of cope with your mind and that rushing thoughts, all those thoughts that you're getting when you try to do those things and self-reflect on yourself?
So I'm a compartmentalizer. I'm a very visual brain. So I have sticky notes everywhere. I mean, not everywhere, but I will write stuff down on sticky notes, right? Or I'll have my columns, and I'll try and just focus on those things at that time. But then again, brains, oftentimes there's a lot of similarities and links to those things. But it's really, it's hard, and I think that it takes time and practice to be able to sit down and focus on, okay, this is my issue at hand right now. I need to focus on just this one. And if you have those other ones that fly in, I literally just write them down. It's like a to-do list for me, but that's just how I operate. Other people, you can do it on your phone, you can do it on a paper, but for me, that's what works.
So is what you're saying, when something when you're trying to have quiet time or self-reflection time, if something comes in that is it's work or whatever, you write it down and you say, I'm putting it over here, and I'm gonna come back to it later. So you sort of give yourself permission to let that thing go. That's great.
So name it, right?
Yeah, I put it. Yeah, you have to own it. I also am very forgetful, mom brain, but still, it's how I've always functioned that way.
It might sound funny too, but breathing certainly helps. We all are doing that right now. Mm-hmm. But being more intentional
Meditation.
about how we do that is really important, and it's calming. Mm-hmm. And so think about the space in which you choose to have that cup of coffee as well. Mm-hmm. Other questions?
Good evening. My name is Brent Reed. I'm a master's candidate here at GVSU. My question is, in the graduate school, we talk a lot about ethical leadership, and a lot of it is theoretical because we're in school. As experienced professionals, what ethical dilemmas have you been confronted with, and how has that shaped your leadership style?
Well, I'll tell you something that confronts me all the time, and Allie too, and a lot of us, right? I spend I shouldn't say decent portion. From time to time, I am the person that will pull someone aside after a meeting, after a conversation, and will say, hey, that thing you said during the meeting, we don't say things like that anymore. Or there's a different way that we can phrase that, or please don't ever call that person that thing again. And it may be based on age or gender or race or all sorts of things. I work in local government. I'm not trying to say that local government is rife with evil or anything like that. But at this stage of the game, if I hear something and I don't think it's appropriate, I'm never going to call someone out. I'm not going to tweet about it. I'm not going to call the newspaper. Not to say that there isn't a place for that sometimes, but in my own way, when I'm with individuals, especially if I've developed a rapport with them, I'll call them. And I know that I have coworkers who've seen it happen, and they come to me and they say, thank you for doing that. And I've had people do it for me sometimes, because I've been in situations where I couldn't tell someone necessarily that when you said that thing to me, it made me feel like X, Y, Z. But I've had other people who sort of come to my rescue, if you will, and have said that. And so that's one thing for me. I want the city of Wyoming, I want my workplace, and our community, quite frankly, to be a place where everybody can thrive, everybody has an opportunity, everybody can be their best self every day. And so in this current environment, I'm the person who will tap someone on the shoulder and say, yeah, let me give you an alternate way to handle that or to say that.
I think that's so important and spot on. Like, you might be in a position where you feel comfortable to go up to that person afterwards, but it's so important to go up to them and give them the opportunity to learn, because we can't get better as a society unless someone's willing to mention, to speak to you. Maybe they completely had no idea. Maybe they are trying to improve themselves, whatever reason, at least go to them and speak to them. But if you feel like you're not in a position where you can be the person to go tell them, go to a colleague, go to a boss, go to your boss's equivalent that you have a great rapport with, and go and speak through it in that way, because they might be in a better position too if you're still uncomfortable. But yeah.
Yeah, being generally an ethical question, and you're going to get asked that question when you're in an interview, and you asked us for an example, and I'll try to give you one in the interest of time, but generally speaking, being ethical requires some risk, right? You're choosing between something, what you think the right answer might be, and maybe not making budget. Or you're choosing between what you think the right answer might be and looking like you made a really, really significant mistake. There's usually risk involved. And I had a situation where I had a staff person who had some disciplinary things around how they spoke with other staff, and some inappropriate things that may have been said. And we managed this conversation, and it was really, really difficult. Like, I'm short. This is a very long story, and I'm going to make it really short. But it ended with this person parting ways with our organization. And one of the things that I really wrestled with that decision is, what was my contribution to that person's failure? What things did I do in the years leading up to that might have given them comfort that was okay, that might have said that, well, the boss says some things that are a little bit strange, so I can say these things, and I really wrestled with that, and that was a very, very difficult, what was my contribution to that, because it probably wasn't zero, and I had to spend some real time with it, it was very difficult. As I said here, it's still difficult for me, but there is usually risk involved in an ethical question, and that's why when you're sitting there and when we talk about knowing who you are and knowing yourself, and knowing that you're going to make mistakes, and if you've set those expectations that I'm not a perfect person, but I'm always going to try to do the best I can, people generally don't expect perfection because they know they're not perfect. So, and that just gives you a lot more grace to be able to operate, and I think it makes that ethical question a little bit easier to answer.
I think we'll go for one more question.
All right, one more question.
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm a senior at Grand Valley this year. Earlier we had kind of touched on the debate when you're deciding between two really good things and knowing yourself and being able to make that decision when it's not good versus bad. But ultimately that ends, I believe, in sacrifice. And obviously you guys are very well experienced leaders and human beings. And I just kind of want to get your opinion or how you've dealt with having to sacrifice. Can be personal and or career related.
So I'll go first, and I'm sorry because I keep going back to the. So when I made the decision to stay home, it was the hardest thing I did, and I think I even up to a year or like 6 months ago. So I've been home for 2 years now as of August, and but started working probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago again. I described it as mourning. I was still in mourning of that former life or that opportunity. But at the same time, finally it like hit me because I kept complaining, like, God, I miss that. I'm so thrilled to be home, but I miss that. You know, oh, the things I could have been working on right now or been doing or where, you know. So like I was mourning it, but then all of a sudden I like tried to smack myself basically upside the head and say, it's okay. Like, it's okay that I might not, you know, that I made this decision and I might have missed out on those things. But who's to say that I would have gotten those projects? Or who's to say that I wouldn't have had another job opportunity come up along the way? Or like a million other branches. Instead, I got to join a couple of boards that I am crazy excited about. And so it's hard, like, it's hard to make that decision when you have that 50-50. They're both great things. But give yourself some time to maybe mourn that loss of the what ifs, but don't spend as much time as I did on it. Like, it's instead take that energy and find something else that's going to make you happy and get you excited about. That's my advice.
That's great.
I'm going to go back even to values, right? Because I think right after I left Grand Valley, I moved to New York, and I was there for a little bit of time. And there was, I had a little health scare, and it was in that moment where I really thought about what was really important to me.
Yeah.
And in that moment, it was about family and connection. When I left graduate school at Grand Valley, those things were important to me, but they didn't weigh as heavily when I was thinking about the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to go back to values. I think it's just to know them and to make decisions that are congruent with those things. And you can't do that without spending some time thinking about what those are.
Mm-hmm.
I think I sacrificed a richer personal life quite significantly. All those hours that I worked in my early years, and I still work a lot of hours, but and this is why I talk so much about knowing who you are. Like, I didn't realize the things that I was leaving behind, that I wasn't focusing on. And you can probably hear it a little bit in my voice when you said sacrifice. I mean, it was like, this is what I wanted. Like, I wanted this position. I wanted to be in power. I wanted to be in the executive room. That's what I wanted. And then you get there and you realized, crap, there were other things that I wanted too. And the good news is that the world is not binary. Just because you're in a place right now doesn't mean that you can't do something else later. But there are sacrifice, and you may not even know what you're sacrificing when you're doing it. But they will happen and they will come. But know that you can usually get another shot at the apple, and if you're willing to sort of step off that pedestal and re-examine your life, you can still have those things too.
Well, Selma, Megan, Allie, it's really been a pleasure and an honor to sit up here with you all and to engage in a conversation about leadership, life, career, and change. I just want to thank you all for your tremendous insights and expertise and your time. So can we please give one more hand?